Hi, Bruins. Welcome to tonight's program. My name is Christine Werlenik. I'm Senior Director of Regional Networks, Affinity Networks, and Future Bruin Initiatives at the UCLA Alumni Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our program, Bruins Living Amid the COVID Pandemic in the U.S. Tonight, we're excited to hear from our three panelists who will introduce themselves in a moment. But first, I want to share that the panelists are not speaking as experts in their region. They're just sharing their experiences with you of how they've been living the last year during our pandemic. Now let's introduce the panelists. Thank you all for joining us. I'll call on each of you, but if you can tell us a little bit about yourselves, where you live, maybe talk about when you graduated, your major, and what you do for work now. Paulina, why don't you start?
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening. I am calling from Miami, Florida. Just to backtrack a little bit, I graduated in 2019. So as Christine said, kind of escaped that last in-person graduation before the pandemic hit. I joined Teach for America in Miami. So I'm currently a third grade teacher and I teach completely virtual online in Miami. And at UCLA, I majored in statistics and I double minored in Spanish and Chicano studies. I'm excited to be here, so thank you for having me.
Thank you. Kevin?
Hi, my name is Kevin Slattery, graduated in the dark ages in 1977 from UCLA. It was an exciting time there. And graduated both in psychobiology and psychology. It mostly just took a lot of science while I was there. Went on then to get some more schooling later in engineering and business, and started out working at TRW in Redondo Beach, mostly a science company, satellites and lasers, and then spent a career doing that kind of engineering and construction. The company itself was purchased by an Alaska Native corporation in 1993. So at that point, I joined the Inupiat Eskimo tribe and worked for 23 years, both with Eskimo and Native populations, helping them build corporations in the US and working with federal government contracts and things. Lived in the Pasadena area for 40 years and subsequently, just a while ago, 18 months ago, moved to Denver. Kind of a new adventure. Our kids live here and all the grandkids, and so we do that. I retired, fortunate enough to retire from all that work about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and started. My son, who was not a UCLA graduate, went to the University of Michigan. He was in the craft beer business, so he convinced me to get into the craft beer business. So we started several businesses related to that and have a location in Denver, one in downtown Los Angeles, and one in Minneapolis. So it's been a real thrill ride through COVID, operating those kinds of businesses. Talk about those a little later.
Thank you. James?
Yeah, hi, my name is James Barragan. I graduated from UCLA in 2013 with a history degree and a minor in English. I was the editor-in-chief of the Daily Bruin, and I continued that into my full-on career, which is that I am now a newspaper reporter. And actually today's my first day on the job at my new gig, which is at the Texas Tribune here in Austin, Texas. And I've been in Austin for going on 7 years now this October. I've worked for a variety of news outlets here, most recently the Dallas Morning News. And like I said, today is my first day at the Texas Tribune. So it's been a wild ride, changing jobs and getting all the HR and paperwork stuff done online. But I'm happy to be here and happy to talk to other Bruins about their experience.
Congratulations.
Thank you, James. Yeah, congratulations. And James, I'm going to start right off with you. So tell us a little bit about how you started your first day of work today and how was that during the pandemic?
Oh, yeah. Well, if we want to take it even a little bit further back, I mean, it's just the interview process during COVID is a little bit, I mean, it's a lot different, obviously. Usually with these kinds of moves, you go there and you meet there in person for a full day. And this time it was spread out through a couple of days, a bunch of Zoom meetings like the ones we're having right now. And there were still great conversations, but it's obviously different. You don't get the same feel for the people, which is another issue just in my job in general. It's different. It's different, but we're adjusting. And today was nice. I got to meet a bunch. I've been on Zoom calls like this all day, pretty much, and doing paperwork and trying to find all of that stuff and send it to them. It was just a lot of back and forth. So not a lot of work got done today, but a lot of meeting nice people, and very excited to start off my job.
Great, thank you. And we'll get deeper into all of that later. Paulina, you're a recent grad, you're doing Teach for America in Miami. So let's talk about when the pandemic hit, you were in Miami. Have you ever taught in person?
Yes. So like I said, I graduated 2019. And so I literally, if we take it back also, I graduated and that night I had to hop on a plane to Miami because I was starting training the next day. So I've been in Miami since June 2019, and I did teach in person that summer and that fall up until March, until the pandemic hit. And then everything just switched virtual first year teaching.
So how was that? Tell us a little bit about how you transitioned then from being a new teacher in person to being a new teacher virtually.
Yeah, it was definitely it's definitely a transition. I think that last year I was the youngest teacher at my school, having been a recent grad, and I think that was to my advantage in terms of technology. So I think that myself and the other TFA teacher who's also just recently graduated, we kind of thrived in the setting that we knew how to work Zoom a little bit better. We were able to get more engaging tools online. So it was very exciting to kind of venture in that way. But I think in the initial, like the first couple months of the pandemic, I think everyone was just pretty scared and didn't really know what to do. And we didn't put too much pressure on the students to like turn in assignments or anything like that. It was more so just making sure they were okay and still kind of learning. But I don't know, it was the first months of the pandemic, and I actually I'm from Southern California, so I actually flew home and expected to be there for 2 weeks and was there for almost 3 months, which was a blessing in itself that I got to spend time with my family after being away for so long. But the initial transition was a little shaky. The summer kind of gave me time to prepare for this year because we didn't know what Miami was going to end up doing, and I started virtual, and I'm thankful that I've stayed virtual because I didn't feel ready to go back until I was vaccinated personally. So I've been virtual this whole time, and if I compare last year and this year, I 100% love teaching personally online better, just because I can teach the content to the students. We can use different online tools, and I teach third grade and they're like incredible on Zoom, and I think it's just opened up a lot of technical opportunities for them. But I do miss seeing them in person. That's the only thing.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Kevin, so you have this brewery restaurant business. So how has your year been?
Oh, wow. So, when you have a career and then you're going to wind down from that career and kind of take it easy. But then I'd worked with my father for a little bit during my career, and I enjoyed that. It was a good kind of bonding experience. So when my son presented that idea to me, and then we started a business in Denver, and Denver was going to be it is a very craft beer centric location. So we have our locations have these pour your own concepts where it's all electronic and tablets, and you can pour as much or little as you want. So we're integrating lots of things that he knew about and I knew about from a business standpoint. But I don't think any of us, Denver started out great, made a lot of money, and so we go, yeah, let's go start LA and Minneapolis, and the last thing on your mind is, hey, there's going to be a worldwide pandemic starting that's going to start to crush all these businesses and no one can go. So starting in March last year, of course, LA was probably one of the first ones, Denver, and then Minneapolis. And each one of those county health departments or the city or the state has their own set of executive orders and regulations. So I would say the first thing is, like Paulina said, just understanding the shock of this happening and coming on quickly, and how do you address it? How do you, you have a staff of people and you have other people working there. And so what are you going to do? How are you going to treat them? You know, what's going to happen? So wading your way through the initial part that you think that might last 4 weeks, or remember they started out 2 weeks and then 4 weeks. Denver was the only honest one. They shut everything down for 8 weeks straight. And we're like, wow, what's, these people are overreacting, you know? So, but then, you know, getting more comfortable with that and figuring out economically how you're going to do this, and then how are you going to, you know, treat your employees ethically? What can you do to help them, you know, so they can survive much as you're trying to survive? And then of course it is morphed into the long haul of like Paulina says, now she enjoys teaching virtually, you know, so you don't quite know what's going to happen in this. And so how do we run a business? How do we bring people in? How do we use outside spaces? And I think the biggest thing here is how do we take advantage of things that the government wants to do to help us? How do we get involved with paycheck protection programs? How do we align ourselves for grants and things? How do we help employees migrate or find their way through other programs that are available for them? And then just how do we keep abreast of all these things that are going to help us stay alive? So it's been different from what you would think about in terms of the financial and operating things that you would think about for running multi-state businesses. So it's been challenging, but I think everybody, much as in all of your professions, has stepped up, understood it. I mean, we're all graduates of a great university, and so you're intelligent. And so how do you use those skills that you have to figure out how to survive and make it work, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, just all of you sharing your experiences. This has been a year, and you have, you know, all of us have learned a lot about how you kind of move forward and work with your staff, your team, family, whatever you need to do to keep things moving forward. James, I want to come back to you a bit about, as a reporter, how has it been working this past year just on news stories, and talk about what you cover, your area?
Yeah. Well, it's been incredibly difficult, just because for us, being there in person and getting to interact with other people is the best way to do our jobs. Just going back to something that Kevin was talking about in terms of, you know, how thoughtful he was about how to be, you know, good to your employees while at the same time keeping the business running during this unprecedented time. I mean, those are the kind of experiences that we were trying to cover as well. And overall, I think what the pandemic taught me is a lot of humility about like the things that we don't know and don't understand, because there just was so much in the beginning. Like, think back to the beginning, and there was just so much we didn't understand. You know, did we have to wear a mask? Did we not have to wear masks? Were masks effective? Were they not effective? I think the science has been proven that they are effective, but even now we're still arguing about it. But in the beginning, I remember people saying, like, you don't need a mask. And so it's really taught me a lot about humility, but the job itself has become a lot harder. In Texas, we had huge elections in 2020 on top of the presidential election, which obviously was a big one for the country. But there was finally, it actually did seem like Democrats actually had a shot at winning the Texas House. And they spent a lot of money trying to do that. And that was really the big story of last year for us in Texas. And because of the pandemic, everything changed. You couldn't do in-person campaigning. Well, you could, but it was like, at what risk, you know? And I think that really cost Democrats when they actually didn't go out there, and Republicans showed up and they were at the houses, you know, perfectly distant with the social distance, masks on. But a lot of the times in the races that really mattered and that made the difference, they were the only ones showing up. And so voters were saying, well, there's only one person showing up. I'm going to pick that person as my candidate. And so it changed everything. And for me, it also changed everything because I didn't feel comfortable going out there on the election, on the campaign trail. That's usually where we that's our bread and butter. We know what the voters are thinking. We're asking them, why do you like this person? Why do you not like this person? We see the real life moments where people are angry with candidates or when they're like adoring of them. And there just was no gauge for that because my newspaper at the time, the Morning News, didn't want to send us out and risk us getting sick. This was not even close to us having a vaccine. The vaccine started really in December. So throughout the entire campaign, we just had no idea. We just kind of were watching it from afar. And there's just a lot of things that you don't see when you're watching from afar. So it did change it a lot, and it continues to. Now we're in the middle of a legislative session, and it's just very, very different. You don't have that same access. And for us as reporters, access is the number one thing. You want to be there. You want to see it in person.
No, thank you. Okay. Let me think. Helena, so you are teaching virtually, but you go into the school, right?
Yes.
And you
So
have other teachers who are actually having students in their classes?
yes. So I think the most interesting thing, just kind of talking about what James said, like every state, and Kevin, like every state and county, it goes down to the county, to the city, to the school, kind of like what the protocols are. Specifically in Miami-Dade, we're like the third or fourth largest school district. And so I think the way that we went about it was, I felt like we were the test subjects in a way. We were back in the classroom in October. And so we started this school year virtual August, September, and then we got news last week of September that our report day back to the school building was October 5th. And personally, that brought me a lot of anxiety because I had no idea what that was going to mean, and proper ventilation, like how are we going to fit all the kids in there? At this point, my class was like too big on Zoom, so how are we going to fit them online? And after having a very honest conversation with my principal, I was actually able to be the one online teacher, because each grade level, at least in our district, has at least one online option, and it was up to the parents. So there's a parent survey, and the parents got to choose whether they wanted their students to be in person or online. And they really try to push the students that were failing, because I work in a tier 1 school, which means we have a lot of students on free and reduced lunch, and it's in a lower income area. And so they really wanted to push certain students to come back because it was just not working out for them online. And I remember being a very difficult time because I felt like no one was listening to teachers, and teachers are very anxious. And I knew teachers that took leave for 2 months because they didn't want to go in person. I knew teachers that, have mom at home, but they need to go in to get a paycheck. So it was a very, very difficult time. But yeah, I've been completely virtual, but I still show up to my empty classroom every single day to teach online. And I mean, that in itself is just interesting, seeing all the other teachers and students. And now I'm fully vaccinated, and so I feel a little less eerie. But in the beginning, up until March, I felt very nervous. Just using the bathroom, I would eat like in my classroom, maybe in my car, because you just didn't know. Like I said, there was no reports on like what it, like, did students transmit it or not? Like, how much at risk were you? And me just being there with other teachers, and they were transparent with data also in terms of like how many students were getting affected, how many teachers are getting affected, but I feel like it never caught up to what the real number was. And up until March, there was just constantly students getting COVID, or parents or teachers getting COVID, and like grade levels having to quarantine twice, like for 2 weeks. And it just really disrupted like the learning. And I think that, I mean, Kevin said no one's gone through this before. And so, I mean, there wasn't like, it was just, they were just trying their best, but I think there could have been different ways to go about it personally.
Yeah, I think that brings up a good point, that there have been a lot of lessons learned this year. I mean, as James was saying, that we thought things were, actually, I think Kevin said that we thought things were closing for 2 weeks. Like, we were told at the university we're closing for 2 weeks and we'd be back. And then they extended it maybe by another month. And we honestly thought that we'd be back in like 2 weeks.
I thought I was getting an early spring break, and then I was like, guess I'm staying home for 3 months, and I had to teach East Coast time on West Coast time, and it was just a whole thing. But I think now we're 4 weeks out into the end of the school year, and every teacher's face is just like, I'm ready for the summer. Like, this has been one crazy year, and I think every teacher deserves a lot of rest. There was also Teacher Appreciation Week last week, so I think it was a lot of love for the teachers in our building too, because they just, especially the older teachers, like I just have a lot of love for them, like trying to figure out technology and also making sure that they're safe as well.
Yeah, I agree. We all have a lot of love for those teachers, and honestly, they do need that few months off to take a break for all they've gone through. I know many teachers, and it's been a long year for them. So Kevin, so you have 3 businesses, 3 different, like Denver, LA, and
Minneapolis.
So in all those different places, I'm sure that the county guidelines are all very different. Are things opening up again? How are you kind of handling all the differences in those areas and running your businesses?
You know, that's a great question because it gets a bit confusing sometimes. And so certain, you know, like in the County of Los Angeles, County Health Department kind of rules the roost a little bit. In different jurisdictions, the state of Minnesota basically issues executive orders. In Denver, it basically comes from the mayor's office. And so it's one of those things you have to be really on it, watching everything, making sure you're getting the automatic feeds of things every day, that when and everybody has their different color coded levels. And so you're going, oh my gosh, what color code are we in now in Denver and things? And so people take more or less aggressive approaches in different jurisdictions. And LA, of course, and LA County was much slower than some other jurisdictions. They had it seemed much higher incidence of COVID, much slower return to normalcy, I would say. Minneapolis had other secondary problems, certainly with a lot of civil unrest in the Minneapolis area that were coloring kind of decisions that people were making. Should we open? Should we not? And then Denver seemed to have it under control a little bit better than these other places that when they made a decision, it was kind of 8 weeks or 12 weeks. Some would say, okay, we're not getting out of this for a while. So you didn't have to worry about it every day. But I would say the minutia of these different regulations was pressing, was difficult at times to keep track of them, because you would have to notify employees, we think you can come back at this period of time. And then with the government stuff, everybody was very, the federal government especially, throwing PPP funds at small businesses, but those had to be used in a certain method to pay for labor in a certain method. And so contacting everybody to come back. And then we all know from certain things with the latest unemployment report, that just came out, what's really the incentive? Do I want to come back and work, or is the money good enough for me not to come back to work? So then you had to talk to everybody individually. It was a little different in service industries than in a lot of other industries. So a lot of hands-on, and then not only the economic side, but then the safety and health side. Did somebody want to come back to work because they were going to be dealing with the public on a day-to-day basis, and were they concerned? And so you had to be sensitive and compassionate about, somebody that didn't work, they had a family and felt that the COVID risk was too high for them. And so you can't make, judgments about, their ability to keep their family safe. And so there's just so many things going on, a real balancing act of bureaucracies, departments, employees, cash flow, keeping your business alive, lessors, renegotiating every lease to see if you could survive and stretch out payments. And certain people were good, certain people were bad. So it was a constant battle. There's no doubt about it. And it still is a battle to this day, but it gets a little smoothed out as things go. And I know everybody has had similar battles, but on different playing fields during this period too.
Well, I'm running a business that probably pretty much closed down.
Mm-hmm.
And, as you talked about, concern for your employees, and also them dealing with do I feel comfortable coming back to work? Do I not? Because they're with a lot of people. That's a lot to go through in this year.
And there's no certainty, because remember in the early part of the pandemic, they would talk about, hey, it's going to come roaring back in the fall. And we're thinking, well, they may get it. And you bring back a certain amount of people, and then you expend all of these government funds, the PPP funds that they have. And so then they have to go on furlough again. And then you get COVID come racing in here. Remember in LA, about Thanksgiving time, we've been shut down 25%, 50%, then shut down, then 25%, then indoor, then outdoor. And most people don't realize then they will allow you to, let's say, open outdoor. LA has a program called Al Fresco, where you can use some of the sidewalk, but you have to go through the bureaucracies of a million forms and getting it done and paying some fees and buying new tables and investing in all that stuff such that you can actually survive outdoors. And then they close everything down, and so it was quite a ride through. You have to be committed to the long term, and I know lots of businesses have shut down because they can't survive it. And so we're fortunate that the way we're running and capitalized ourselves, that we committed to being fair and ethical, about how we're going to conduct the businesses and see if we can keep going.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, James. So let's talk about Texas. How are things open in Texas? I think everything's open in Texas. And and how is your area responding, or as a reporter, even are you seeing that, like, are people being vaccinated? Do they want to be vaccinated? I know Texas is one of the states that there's been a lot of different things up and down with controversy in Texas.
Right. Yeah. I think we have, it's really been sort of how Kevin described. It's been a little bit of everything. Early in the pandemic, a lot of the local officials, like city and county officials, took like pretty drastic, decisive decision to just close down everything. And they put I don't know that they put in curfews, but there's definitely a lot of limits on like what the businesses could do. And then the state government officials tolerated that for a little while. But then at a certain point, they sort of said, we can't do that to businesses. We've got to allow them to set their own rules. And so they overrode the local orders to close down things. And then they started, it was also very confusing because the rules from the state then overrode the local ones, but then also created their own rules for when can you open up, when do you have to close. And it was different. And again, the humility that goes into this, because for folks who aren't from Texas, it's a big state. It's humongous. And there's really big counties like Dallas and Harris County, where Houston is. And there's also really small counties, there's one county where there's like 100 people. And so that's why it didn't make sense to have like across the board, okay, you have to close all your businesses in very densely populated areas like Dallas and Harris County, where Houston is, and like this county that has 100 people, like they're obvious, which is a more rural area and where people aren't as densely populated. I mean, the virus is not going to spread as much there. So I think that was very confusing. That was very frustrating for a lot of folks. And on both sides, because on the business side, obviously the business, I think Kevin will agree, the thing that they don't like is uncertainty, right? So they want to know what the rules are and how they can follow them and how they can go about them. So then when the state and the city county officials started getting into this sort of grudge match, that was not good for the counties, because they were like, that was not good for the businesses, because they just kind of wanted to know the rules. The other part of the balancing act, of course, was the public health side of it, right? Which everybody wants to be safe, like Kevin's talking about. And how can we still enjoy these restaurants, these breweries, while being safe and making sure nobody gets sick? So it was a super difficult one. I think now, and really for the last, I mean, we did not stay shut down for very long. There was, you know, a sort of quote unquote a mask mandate that we had to do when we went to the grocery stores. We'd have to wear masks, but then that also got shut down by the state officials. And then it was basically on the business to say, hey, you decide whether there's a mask mandate or not in your place, which also added a lot of confusion and frankly made it very difficult for a lot of the businesses, because I hope Kevin hasn't had to deal with this, but some folks who don't like the rules that are in place, especially when they're set by the business owners, then there's a hard time there because the business wants everybody to stay safe. And maybe there's an uncooperative person there. So that's been tough. But for the most part, we've been pretty open, I would say, since maybe the beginning of this year, and we no longer have a mask mandate. And we're pretty up and running. The city of Austin, which is one of the most liberal cities in Texas, they've had a sort of those yellow, green, red light ones that Kevin's talking about. On like, you know, when is it okay to go out and eat? But you know, I'm fully vaccinated now, and my partner and I, we went out for our anniversary 2 weeks ago and did still an outdoor thing. And then this weekend we went and had an indoor dining experience, and it was very nice. I mean, still spread out, still nice. And yeah, so I mean, we're pretty open now. And it's, yeah, but it's been a different experience for everybody. Like I'm saying, we had been very careful throughout the pandemic about not going out. We did a lot of ordering in. But since we've gotten the vaccination, we've gotten a little bit braver, and our risk tolerance is a little bit higher because we're young, healthy adults, and we don't have children to worry about. We don't have elderly parents to worry about. Both of our parents are out of a city, at least. My folks are still in California, hers are in Houston, and so our risk tolerance is a little bit better, especially now that there's a vaccine. So, but it sure has been an adventure, and the mixed rules and regulations have been something to navigate.
Yeah, I agree with it has been kind of hard to keep up with what the rules are. And even in Los Angeles, they're like, we're going to be in the yellow tier. And we're all like, we don't know what that even means. But yay.
That is so true, because they post these things. And so, like I say, with my son, who, you know, working with him and having, and we were talking about the safety issues. So I would have to ask him to go into work every day to run the business. And you're sending your own child in there, you know, to be in the middle of people that, you know, you try and be as careful as possible. I was very careful, but yeah, you're sending a family member in because it's the only thing you can do. You can't bring anybody else in. So that got a little rough. But the mask mandate, I was following up on James's thing. The Denver seemed to be, and I enjoy Denver and I enjoy Colorado because it finds a balance between, you know, something that might be in Austin where people are more liberal, and Denver is a more liberal city, but then an hour from here is Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the plains. You head to Nebraska. I didn't even understand this. And so then you head to West, and it's very conservative. And so there's a lot of different people, but I would say in a business that we run with, you know, craft beer, and you were wondering whether or not somebody doesn't want to wear a mask, but I would say it skews to a crowd that's maybe 36 to 24 in that group. So they're going to be more inclined to follow the rule of masking, and they just seem to be more inclined. We've never had an issue with people having, you know, that we had some issue that somebody didn't want to obey the rules, but
they want to drink more of your beer, Kevin.
They seem to, but everybody, you know, I like Colorado. The governor here, Governor Polis, is very pragmatic, and he is a guy that has had businesses that he started and built up over time, and so he engages. It's unlike California, where you're so distant from elected officials, the governor, the mayor, and other people. It's a reasonably small state, and I mean, he has a call like this, and we all get on and talk to him about stuff, and he kind of, okay, we listen to you, and we're going to do it this way. So it's exciting that, you know, you have politicians that are accessible at this level.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. James, I have another question for you. How do you feel your workplace has responded and adjusted as the year has gone on? And you can talk about, I mean, I guess your former job.
Yeah, that's been a challenge because I think personally and from a health perspective, they were very accommodating and they were very nice. Like they never sent, like I said, I didn't have to go on the campaign trail. They didn't force me to go anywhere I didn't want to go. In fact, they actively said, "Hey, just be careful. We don't actually want you going if you're going to put yourself at risk." So they were very understanding about that stuff. Um, Almost to a fault because like I was saying, we didn't get out there. And so we couldn't really, we couldn't tell the story of the campaign trail. That was difficult. Um, so that but again, the balancing act and sort of what Kevin's talking about, you don't want to send your people out there and then, God forbid they get sick and then it's kind of on you and you'd hate that. But on the other hand, I don't know. I just the reporting has been tougher. The reporting has been tougher. There's no way around it. And it's not been fun. And the best, like I keep saying over and over, the best thing is to get out there and talk to people. And when early on in the pandemic, I went out and I covered a protest against the mask mandate, and that was a very difficult one to cover because I was trying to be safe, so I was wearing a mask, and you get heckled for wearing a mask. You're also getting heckled for being part of the press. So that was very difficult. And I think maybe that influenced a lot of like the decisions not to go out after that. Because we were also, as Kevin pointed out, in Minneapolis, obviously there was the George Floyd protest. And I think our paper did send people out. I didn't personally have to go, but we sent people out, and I mean that was also a difficult thing to cover. So it's been stressful and it's been hard to get at the story when you're not talking to people. We found ways around it. We did a lot of submission forms where people could submit, what was going on with them. I was covering a lot of unemployment, so I'm very familiar with what Kevin's talking about in terms of like PPP and the unemployment insurance benefits and how to handle that stuff for folks who didn't feel comfortable coming back. And, we were getting questioned. It was, when Kevin talks about the government and how difficult it was to navigate that stuff and how people had so many questions. I mean, we were sort of a de facto telling people how to fill out their unemployment applications and whether they had to go back or not, or whether they would be penalized if they didn't feel safe going back. So that was, I think, a good workaround. And it really was rewarding for me as a reporter because it was the kind of stuff that you want to do, right? You want to help people and you want to help them navigate that red tape. So that was really some of the most rewarding work that I got done over the pandemic, helping people figure out how do you get this unemployment, payment that's there. You're paying taxes on it, so it's your money really. And how do you approach the pandemic safely? What are the rules on going back? Do you have to go back? Do you not have to go back? It was really rewarding. I did just talk to like everyday people, which sometimes in politics writing, you sort of, I try not to, but I think you do inevitably because you're talking to politicians, you lose track and you lose sight of them. Like, how are these decisions impacting everyday people? And so that was really, really rewarding to hear from someone, who a week after we wrote about them, got their unemployment insurance payments, their benefits, and just how happy they were, because like these people like literally could not pay their rent, could not make their car payments, were struggling, were getting behind, because like Kevin said, some people will work with you if you're behind on a payment or, are understanding of your situation, and some people are not. So to be able to help those people out was great. And I kept in touch with a lot of them. And unfortunately for some of them, they just couldn't make it work and they had to move elsewhere. They had to move with other families. So yeah, really ran the gamut there.
Yeah, no, it was good that you could help them and cut through that red tape, because I know it was very complicated for many, many, many people. Paulina, tell me how you feel your workplace responded and adjusted as the year went on. And I know you talked a little bit about it with those who would teach in person and those who taught virtually?
Yeah, I think that just kind of agreeing with James, just like as a state as a whole, I think Florida was one of the first, like, I feel like we've been fully open, not 100%, but pretty much since like last summer. I mean, I was very cautious and I ordered takeout for most of that time. But I think that had a lot to do with what the district was deciding what to do. And again, we're like the fourth largest district in the country. So I think in that sense, what worked for maybe some schools who are more resourced and had the materials didn't work for schools like ours. And a lot of my students have like worked in computers and things like that. And it just kind of highlighted the inequities across even the district, because as an overall district, it's like an A+ district, I believe. But in terms of the pocket schools, like the schools that are struggling, like my own like students and families were really, really struggling. And it was very difficult to see that. I think in terms of how our school or district responded, the idea was for us to start this completely new program. They like had worked on it all summer. It was like through this different program, and we had a whole training on it a week before school started. They pushed back the school start date, and the first day of school, the system crashed, and within a week, we just like threw it out the window. And so it was really disappointing, I think, for a lot of teachers, because it's like you introduce this new program, which, you know, they thought would be helpful, and I understand that. But we ended up just going back to Teams and Zoom, which is what we were doing. So it was like, had that been the plan all along, we could have had maybe a more sustainable, you know, design, and summer was kind of a chance to build that. And so I think that's where a lot of it fell a lot on the teachers, you know, who were still teaching online, like to come up with their own, you know, Bitmoji classrooms. You probably saw those everywhere. Like every teacher's creating these Bitmoji classrooms that had these links to everything. And I think that I think also like with my own personal experience, like my principal was very understanding with where people were at, and some teachers were ready to go back. They like hated teaching online, and thankfully in my situation, I was like, look, I'm not ready to go back. I love teaching online and I'm good at it. So can I stay here? She's like, perfect. I'm like, cool. Like, you know, and like that wasn't the situation. I live with two other teachers, and they both had to go back to teaching students like since October, which I think wasn't a norm in a lot of other states for a long time. And they're even living with them made me nervous, because I was like, that's just exposing our bubble. And our biggest thing was like, how, you know, who's in your bubble, and like who are you being exposed to. And I think that outside of us and my partner, like that was basically it, because they were, and my partner is also a teacher, so it was just like everyone was being exposed to all these students, and not everyone was I guess had the opportunity to teach online the whole year. And I just feel very, very lucky. And my students, I think, did incredible online, and for their age and what they were able to accomplish this year, like it's just a lot. And I think that my biggest fear just across the whole education system is that this pandemic is going to cause a huge gap. And I think that some students maybe pass along that maybe aren't ready, but may go because, you know, everyone got passed along last year. I think, you know, that may be the case this year. And I just have seen the effects of getting third graders that are on a first grade level or less, and like seeing them go to fourth grade is just not the best situation. But I can only advocate for my 30 kiddos. But I think it just varies on the schools. In my own experience, it's been, I don't know, a very unique one. Like I signed up for Teach for America to teach 2 years, and these are, I mean, it's not what I signed up for, but I'm here for my students and gonna finish out the year strong with them.
And so when you finish in a few weeks,
yeah,
you'll then be done with teaching and Teach for America, and you'll go on to something else.
Yes. So it's a 2-year contract. I could stay a third year, like I have a certification that lets me stay an extra year, or teach at a different school. But I'm looking to transition into technology or like education tech, and I started a whole little coding club with my kids there, and very passionate about just diversity in tech. And I was a stats major, so kind of using what I learned in the classroom and just kind of saying like, I grew up in low-income schools, but then like teaching them is like a whole other element. Teaching them in a pandemic is a whole other element. So kind of combining all those interests with, you know, my love for technology and diversity within the field is kind of my next step.
Thank you. Now, I also know that, you know, your family's in California and you're in Florida. So are they trying to pull you back? Or are you doing okay there?
I come from like a Mexican American family, and my whole family back in Southern California, we're from Riverside, California. They are all within like a 30-minute radius. And there's like my one aunt in NorCal, and then like me in Miami. And they're like, can't you be a teacher in California? I was born and raised California. I love it. I just wanted to experience something new. I'm hoping to head to New York, and then maybe I'll go back. Like I'm already out here on the East Coast, might as well, enjoy it a little bit. And that was the one thing that moving here kind of took away, that opportunity to kind of truly explore Miami. Like I've been able to do some things, and most of it's outdoors and the beach is nice and stuff, but I think to fully enjoy the city was kind of taken away. But I think compared to like what everyone else gave up in the pandemic, everyone gave up something, and I'm okay with that being my thing.
Okay. James, now are you from Texas or?
No, I'm also from the Inland Empire. I'm actually from Pomona, which is the Inland Valley, but still
Oh my gosh.
shout out to
I'm
the
actually from Paris, but I always say Riverside.
Yeah, shout out to the 909 for sure.
And so how has, do you have family close to you, or is it also distant?
Oh yeah, no. My parents are still back in Pomona, and yeah, so that's been super hard. I haven't seen them since like 2019, Christmas 2019. So it's been a long time. So that's been very, very hard. We've obviously done a lot of FaceTiming, and we've obviously done a lot of phone calls. And in fact, my mom's Mexican, so today is Mexican Mother's Day. So after this, I've got to give her a call after work.
Yes, you do.
And so, yeah, that's been super hard. And even I do have family in San Antonio, but even with them, we've been very, very careful. My cousin out there, she had a newborn when the pandemic started, a couple months old, but he's now almost 2, and I've met him in person once. I think I met him the January right before the pandemic. So it's been very hard. But I mean, to the other point that maybe the other side of what Paulina was saying is, it's really given me like a new appreciation for like life, and for like just everything about like living life, like wanting to do all the things, like how Paulina's talking about Miami and not really getting to enjoy it. I live in a wonderful city too. All of us really, it sounds like we're all in really amazing cities. And one thing Madeline, my partner, and I were saying is, we need to get out and go see more restaurants. We need to go out, and we have amazing live music here in Austin, and we can't wait for the live music to return. So we're very excited for all of that, and really take it. And we've lived here for so long, but we haven't taken advantage of it nearly enough. And so renewed zeal for just go out and do it. Just go out and have some fun.
Living life.
You go out and watch the bats take off from.
Oh yeah, from the bridge.
We do it multiple times this summer.
Yeah, that's fun to do. Yeah.
I saw that once when I was in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, you live in Denver now, so you're all your family, right? Because your kids and grandchildren.
We are, yeah. So I was listening to those nice stories about the Inland Empire and different places. I was actually born in Hawthorne, California, if everybody knows where Hawthorne is. And then I grew up for a lot of my life in Inglewood, California. Mm-hmm. And so then we moved into kind of inner Los Angeles, maybe south of Hollywood, just in some areas there. And so I felt I really knew Los Angeles quite well. My father had moved out here. His family moved out in 1941 from Omaha, Nebraska. And so the stories of people and families that moved to California to really enjoy the kind of things that, whether or not that be domestic or international movement into Southern California, Southern California gave people a lot of things, and now people are moving to different locations, but still, I think a lot of people still consider Southern California in that area kind of a home base and have a good spot in their heart from it. But this was one of these things that you reach a point in your life where your kids are in a different area. My son and his wife that he met, they went to University of Michigan, looked all around the country, and decided Denver was about 9 years ago a great spot to move into, and it's turned out to be that way. My oldest daughter went to school above Chicago at Northwestern, and they then moved into the Bay Area and stuff, and it just got wildly expensive there to live. I mean, you talk about expensive. And so they subsequently moved here and in the technology-based business. So it's like, all of our kids are here and grandkids are being born here, and we deserve a kind of an adventure. So let's come here and use Denver as a base and go all over and go to places like Austin and just, when they say there's a big Cheyenne Frontier Days with all this country music up here, well, let's go there and let's go here. And so we're at a point in our life where we can do that kind of thing, and it's fun. And so we're trying to do the COVID stopped a lot of that, but certainly like James was saying, we're all looking forward to enjoying the locations we're in. And Pauline, Miami is probably a really fun, super fun place to be if you could just get out and feel comfortable about that. It's
I mean, you can, if you're
vibrant
comfortable
city.
with it. It's open for you. I
Yeah.
barely went out to eat indoor for the first time like in over a year, and I was like, I still felt terrified. And I think it's, not to cut you off, something that I think everyone's gonna have to get used to is like everyone's in their own levels of how cautious they were. And I think releasing that, at least for me, I have a lot of anxiety, so like releasing it is gonna be a lot slower for me because I just was so anxious in my family that had it. And so I'm also excited to just get to travel, and I have friends in Austin and Denver, and going back home and being able to spend time there is gonna be very exciting.
Very nice. We went to, just a quick story. So we're starting to venture out, although obviously we got all our vaccines and all that kind of thing. So Denver is moving pretty quickly, and there was a craft fair show, and there's going to be a lot of artists there. And so we said, let's go and see if we can start doing what we can to support local craft artists and things. And they go, masks are optional, because they basically, it's all outdoors and you're running around, and they just said mask option. Go, well, you bring your mask. 100% of the people had masks, so they're still not ready. And there's not in Denver a big contingent of, let's say, people that want to be, and it's their right, if they want to be not wear a mask or something, they're fully vaccinated and stuff. But still, everybody was wearing masks. So okay, we'll put on a mask and go with the flow. Even though I feel pretty comfortable being vaccinated, that
I have to say,
we've done our things.
Being vaccinated does make you feel a little bit more liberated. Like I feel much better having been fully vaccinated a while ago. Okay, so I have another question for you all. Paulina, what is one lesson you have learned during this time that you think something you've learned that you want to continue after the pandemic is over?
Yeah, I think James kind of touched on it, and I'm very close to my faith and just believing that like everything happens for a reason, and like we're here for a purpose. And I think that I think everyone can agree that the pandemic kind of heightened that it's like humility, and life is very precious and can be gone in an instant, and just kind of being very grateful for my family and my grandparents that I still have here, and just everyone's health, and how I don't know, technology. I mean, there's this big old thing about how technology is keeping people separated, but during this time it brought my students to me, it brought me to my family across the country, and how I have been able to keep in touch even with like my UCLA friends, and we try to hop on FaceTime and Zoom more just because we wanted that social interaction. And I don't just kind of the importance of, I think before the pandemic, I was just very busy, especially as a first year teacher, trying to figure it out and balance everything. And I learned that I need to take a step back and just truly just appreciate where I am, appreciate people I have around me, and like making sure that I'm prioritizing those relationships, because I think being young and hungry, I just like wanted to hop on the next opportunity, and just making sure I'm like enjoying the city I'm in and enjoying like the friends I have here, and making sure that I'm still keeping in contact with like my family back home too, because everyone knows how to use Zoom. So just kind of appreciating like our health and those moments, and kind of how we've all kind of talked about just being ready to like enjoy our lives and live lives, and kind of have that like drive to like want to experience new things and go to new places again.
Thank you. James, same question.
Yeah, for me, similarly, I mean, I think it's really driven me to appreciate the friends and family that I have in my life. And there's been a lot more phone calls and FaceTimes and Zooms just to check in
Mhm.
on people. I similarly, checked in with my UCLA friends. We'd hop on, Zooms or Google Meets every couple of months. My good friends from back home, we'd hop on the phone in a way that, with a regularity that we hadn't done in the past. It was always reserved for, whenever there's a wedding or whenever, I go home for the holidays or something. But we did it much more regularly, and it was just like good for my heart. It felt good. So I think that's one thing I definitely want to continue to do as we go forward, because it was just nice to have that presence of people that you care about deeply and just be more in tune with them. So that's something that I definitely am going to keep doing.
Good. Kevin, how about you?
It's interesting that, let me see what's happened. Somehow my screen's, the, at a different age profile than a lot of the younger people and people on the call and stuff. And so having family members at different ages, and they're mostly in their mid-30s and things, everybody approaches things a little differently. Some have more fear, some have less fear. And so how do you be sensitive to sometimes what I might say unrealistic fear? I don't think my son-in-law left the house since day one when it went off. It just shut down, locked himself in the house and the whole family. And other people were more open and not, they balanced the risk reward of doing little things. And so I would say learn to be flexible with people that have very, rigid, feelings either about their health or how they want to treat their family, and employees that want to do certain things that they feel are very important. And so you can't be dogmatic or overly conservative about things. You have to be flexible. It was a really trying period. Americans over the last couple hundred years have been tested for a lot of different things, whether that be pandemics or wars or debt or depressions and things. And so how do you be resilient, and how do you work together and get everybody talking things out, and then be sensitive to allow people to move on in a certain way? And then how do you come back together such that you can move forward? But I think the last thing is, how do you get away from just being so fearful of something like this, and how do you understand that you can survive it and then build strength from it? It's almost like anything, Paulina, you're saying, you take a new test in life, you go to Miami, you do these kind of things, and you learn from that, and you test it, and then you're stronger for that, and then you can move on to accept a bigger challenge. And James, you moved to a different city to test yourself. Can I survive in this pool? Can I succeed in things from what I've done in the past? Same thing here. Can we grow and succeed and form our character to move on? And we've got a short period of time on this planet, and so how do we take the best use of it and build ourselves up and kind of go from there? So that's kind of what I take from it.
Okay, thank you. I'm just making sure. So we're at time, but I want to thank you all so much. This was so wonderful, and I appreciate you joining us tonight and sharing your experiences. And I also want to thank all of those people who joined us tonight on this webinar. This session is recorded, and we will notify you when the recording is available on the UCLA Alumni YouTube channel. Again, I want to thank the panelists. You guys are wonderful, and go out and explore, because you all seem like explorers. So go out and explore now, and hopefully the pandemic will totally be over soon, and we'll all be at one of Kevin's
be great. But we still get great, I think we all get great feelings about UCLA when we see the basketball team go forward and do so well.
Gosh, amazing.
And then even yesterday, I was saddened yesterday with the women's beach volleyball team, but they had a great run at it. And so I think keeping, Lauren and I hosted the Colorado alumni group here at First Draft, and that's how we kind of got going. And then I talked to Lauren, and we were just about to put on something in downtown LA for everything, and then the pandemic hit. So keeping those associations, and I know both of you said that you're keeping your associations with your classmates. And that's a big part of it, is being proud of, having been gone to UCLA and being proud of the friends and the accomplishments that the university has. So that's also another great part of this.
Yeah, and Lauren says that we'll all get together. Lauren, for all of you who are watching, is our staff member who works with the Colorado network and also Texas and Miami. And
Nice.
she'll work with Kevin to get something going when we're all open again.
And we'll send pictures out for everybody because we had a great time.
Yes, you can send them to us and we'll send it in the thank you email that we send to all those who are viewing. But again, thank you all so much. And
Thank you.
everybody have a good evening and go Bruins.